September 21st, 2014, from CenturyLink Field in Seattle, Washington. It was a rematch of Super Bowl 48 as the Denver Broncos came into Seattle to face the Seahawks. Denver won the toss and they elected to defer, so the Seahawks started off with the ball and they would go 3 and out and they would punt the ball to Denver. But then on Denver's first play from scrimmage, it was shades of Super Bowl 48 as they ended up fumbling, but it was Monty Ball, not a missed snap at center this time. And so the Seahawks took over with about 13 and a half minutes left in the first quarter, and they had the ball on the Denver 23. They ended up getting 17 yards on first down as Curse caught a 17-yard pass from Wilson, and then Marshawn Lynch got him up to the 1, but then he lost the yard, and on fourth down they went for the field goal as Hauschka came in and kicked the 20-yard field goal to put the first points on the scoreboard as the Seattle Seahawks now led 3-0. So now the Broncos took over with about 10 and a half minutes left in the first quarter. They would march all the way down into the red zone and all the way down to the goal line as they got all the way to the 5-yard line of Seattle, but they wouldn't be able to punch it into the end zone, and they would end up having to settle for a 24-yard field goal from McManus, which tied this game up at 3 apiece. So now the Seahawks got the ball back with about 3.5 left in the first. They would end up punting moments later as the Broncos got the ball to bring the first quarter to a close. They opened up the second quarter on their own 35. They would end up punting 2 plays later. So the Seahawks got the ball. They would end up punting on this drive. Now Denver took over on their own 7-yard line with about 9.5 minutes left before halftime. They wouldn't get very far, so they would end up punting 8 plays later. Seahawks then took over with 5.5 minutes left before halftime, and Russell Wilson made short work of the Broncos on this drive as it only took him 4 plays to go 73 yards in a little over 2 minutes, capped off by a 39-yard touchdown to Lockette, which put the Seahawks ahead by a touchdown at 10-3. So now the Denver Broncos took over with about 3 minutes left before halftime, but they would go 3 and out, and they punted the ball back to Seattle, who now had about 2.5 minutes left in the second quarter to get something going, and that's what they did. Is Russell Wilson marched them all the way down the field, 68 yards in 10 plays, capped off by a 5-yard touchdown pass to beast mode Marshawn Lynch, which then gave the Seahawks a 2-touchdown lead at 17-3, as this game would end up going to halftime after Peyton Manning took a knee moments later. So the score was 17-3 Seattle at halftime. So it looked a lot like the Super Bowl in terms of Seattle was totally in control of that first half. But then coming out in the third quarter, the Broncos had the ball, but they couldn't get anything going. They went 3 and out. And so the Seahawks got the ball back. They would end up punting it back to the Broncos, and these two teams started to trade punts as the Broncos punted it back, and then the Seahawks went 3 and out and punted it back, and then the Broncos went 3 and out and punted it back. And so now the Seahawks would take over with about 6 minutes left in the third quarter, and they got all the way down into field goal range at the Denver 28, where Hauschka would come on the field to attempt a 46-yard field goal, but it was wide left as he missed, and the score remained 17-3. So now the Broncos took over on their own 36 with about a minute and a half left in the third as they brought the quarter to a close, but they would end up having a punt as they opened up the fourth quarter. So the Seahawks would start their first drive of the fourth quarter pinned up against their end zone on their own 8-yard line, and moments later, just 3 plays after starting the drive, Marshawn Lynch was tackled in the end zone as the Broncos got a safety. So it was now 17-5, and the Seahawks would have to punt the ball on the safety punt to the Broncos, but they would hold them as their defense came up huge, and the Broncos would end up punting the ball back to Seattle. So the Seahawks had the ball with about 11 minutes left in the fourth, but then Russell Wilson threw an interception as Harris gave the ball back to the Broncos and Peyton Manning as they were now down by 12 points with 11 minutes left in this game. And they had the ball on the Seattle 19, and Peyton Manning got them into the end zone 5 plays later with a 3-yard touchdown pass to his favorite target, Julius Thomas, and it was now 17-12. So now the Seattle Seahawks took over with about 9.5, a little less than that, on the clock, but they would end up punting the ball back to the Broncos. The Broncos took over with 6 minutes left in this game, down by 5, and they marched all the way down to the Seattle 24, and Peyton Manning dropped back to pass on 3rd and 11, looking for Wes Welker, but here came Killer Cam Chancellor in the Legion of Boom as he intercepted Peyton Manning and returned it 52 yards. So now the Seattle Seahawks had the ball on the Denver 35, and 5 plays later, they would end up settling for a field goal as they got all the way to the Denver 10, but couldn't get into the end zone. And the 28-yard field goal attempt was good as Hauschka put 3 more points on the board, and the score was now 20-12 as the Seahawks led by 8 points with less than a minute left to play in regulation. But you never count Peyton Manning out as he drove the Broncos 80 yards in 6 plays in just 40 seconds, capped off by a 26-yard touchdown pass to Jacob Tamme, and now they were down by 2 points. They went for the 2-point conversion, and Peyton Manning found Julius Thomas, and the 2-point conversion was successful, and this game was tied at 20 apiece, and the game would end up going to overtime as Russell Wilson took the knee to bring this game in regulation to an end of the 4th quarter. So now in overtime, the Seattle Seahawks would end up getting the ball first, and they marched down the field as the Broncos weren't able to stop them. They started off in their own 20, and they just went down the field, 13 plays, 80 yards, taking almost 6 minutes. And on 1st and 6, and 1st and goal from the Denver 6, Marshawn Lynch, beast mode, punched it in, and the Seattle Seahawks win an exciting game in the rematch of Super Bowl 48 in overtime, 26-20. So what a game this was, and in this game, Russell Wilson was 24 for 34 with 258 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He also had 40 yards rushing off of 9 carries. Beast mode Marshawn Lynch had 26 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown, the game winner in overtime. Peyton Manning was 31 for 49 with 303 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Emmanuel Sanders was the game's leading receiver with 11 receptions for 149 yards. And Irvin had 13 tackles and 1 tackle for a loss. Maxwell had 11 tackles. And Chancellor came up with that huge interception. Harris had an interception for the Broncos. This is an exciting game. Went all the way to overtime as regulation could not decide this one. The Seahawks win it, and they improved their record to 2-1. That's also the Broncos' record, as the Seahawks have now handed them their first loss of the regular season here in 2014. The Seahawks now are just 1 game back of the Arizona Cardinals, who are in first place there in the West here in this early season, as it's just the first month, as it's only week 3. But right here, they get a huge win at home against the Broncos as they win by 6 points in overtime with the final score once again 26-20.